Hello and welcome to Retro Gaming Swede. My name is Oskar and today I'm going to take a look at this. The NES Classic Mini. What features does it have? How do the games feel? Is it worth to scout out a cheap one online? Or should it burn in the depths of hell? Stay put to find out.
No, it shouldn't.
So, the NES Classic Mini. It's cute, but before you even start it up, you need to get a extension cord for the controller. Or get a controller like this one from Retro Devil. These are amazing and has a bit more functionality than the original. It has turbo buttons and an AB button for some double dragon jumping. Yeah, the original controller cord is an absolute joke, and Nintendo really failed on that one. When booting it up, you get to the menu. It's functional and looks pretty okay. On the top, there's buttons for display, options, language, some legal stuff, and a button called manuals. So we'll check them out from left to right. Under the display button are three options. CRT filter, which is the scan lines option, 4:3 aspect ratio, and pixel perfect, which is the one I use for this video and is the one I think looks best. The options menu houses three settings. Demo, which toggles the idle demo on or off. Auto shutdown, which toggles the idle auto shutdown on or off. And screen burn-in reduction. In languages, you can change between English, French, Italian, German, Spanish, Dutch, Portuguese, and I want to say Russian. It has those weird letters, but I'm not sure. Legal notices are just some legal mumbo-jumbo about the software licenses on the console. And the Double Dragon franchise is apparently owned by Arc System Works now. The more you know. The manuals button gives you a QR code to get the manuals online. I checked this out and it appears to work fine. I do, however, think it's a bit cheap that they couldn't be asked to put them on the console itself. So, as you might have noticed, the options are pretty bare bones with only 3 display options and the options menu allowing for pretty much no customization. You can't even select borders instead of the black bars on either side of the game. That's kind of bad. On the bottom you see miniatures of the game's box art. And beneath that you have some instructions. If you press down after pressing reset in a game, you can use save states, letting you continue later from the exact place you saved, which is a standard in most emulator systems really. Select can sort the games in different orders and the start button starts the game. Now we move on to the games. There's 30 games on this thing, and with a few weird choices, they're pretty much real classics. We start off with Balloon Fight. Now, this is a game that has you playing as a guy hanging beneath 2 balloons, and if they pop, you die. Your objective is to pop your opponent's balloons and kick them off the stage to win. You accelerate by tapping the A button or holding down the B button. The controls take a while to get used to, but once you get the hang of it, it's pretty fun. Recommended, even though if I were to list my favorite 30 NES games, it wouldn't be on there. Up next we have one of the best games ever, and my absolute favorite in this selection of titles, Bubble Bobble. This is a game I played a lot on my Commodore 64 as a kid, and even though the NES game doesn't sound as good as the Commodore version, it plays really well on Nintendo's little grey box. It is a classic after all and one of the best 2-player games ever made. If you want to play the complete game though, you should check out the Sega Master System version. Seriously recommended. Next up is the original vampire murder simulator, Castlevania. It plays exactly as good as you remember, and it's just as unforgiving. This game is hard. This is an absolute must play on the NES and an essential game on this little console. Unlike its later sequels, this is a pretty linear game, but not worse off for it. You will need a ton of practice to get through it though. Absolutely recommended. Up next we have the sequel to Castlevania, Simon's Quest, and a game I think could be replaced by something else. Maybe the far superior third game. This is where the Metroidvania style Castlevania games really started, and for some reason they screwed it up completely. The gameplay in itself is solid enough, but the exploration and grinding is tedious. The dialogue is all messed up and cryptic as fuck, so if you're gonna be playing this game, you'll need a walkthrough or a guide to get you through it. I just wonder why they wouldn't have put the third game on here instead. Not recommended. Next we have Donkey Kong. The arcade classic that introduced us to the Super Mario cast, and of course its leading bad guy, Donkey Kong. I really like the music in the main menu, and when you start the game you hear the classic dum 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 dum. There's not much to say on this one. It's just a classic Donkey Kong game. Really awesome game of its time and still plays well to this day. Highly recommended. Now we have Donkey Kong Jr. Maybe the first time Mario is the bad guy. Anyway, it plays fine, but I never played this much back in the day, so can't really say if there's any difference to the original cartridge version. You play as Donkey Kong Jr. trying to rescue his father imprisoned by the evil Mario, and the objective is to climb to the top, avoiding all the enemies Mario throws at you. Decent game, pretty fun if you're into arcade classics. Recommended. Next on the list is Double Dragon 2 The Revenge. A game I never played back in the day but really enjoy nowadays. It's an amazing beat 'em up featuring 2-player support, and it feels like it's supposed to be played in 2-player mode. The only drawback is that there's no continues in this game. So if you die, you'll just have to start over from the start. That sort of sucks and also means a lot of people will never see the later stages. Otherwise, this is a really nice NES game. Just remember to stay away from the door in the chopper scene. Absolutely recommended. Now we have Dr. Mario. Yeah, I'm not playing this. This is a puzzle game. I hate them. So here's once again my amazing girlfriend playing some Dr. Mario. It's a match 4 puzzle game with the objective to get rid of all the viruses by connecting pills to the viruses. But there's some weird things in this. There's no speed increase on levels, so if you lower the speed or just get used to the speed, you can basically just go on forever, which is almost like cheating. The only thing that happens from level to level is that there's more viruses. I like the chill music actually, it's kind of laid back, but the loop is very short. Recommended if you like puzzle games. Now, Excite Bike. A really fun little motocross game with an amazing title song. A fun thing in this game is that you can either race in time trials or against enemy opponents. There's also a course editor where you can make your own death traps or just a really varied course to challenge your friends. The only thing that's missing is a 2-player mode. This is a really fun little game that's totally recommended. Next we move on to Final Fantasy. This is a real RPG classic, and even though it has aged pretty poorly with a really grindy and slow gameplay, I still recommend trying out this game. The game is absolutely huge by NES standards and has amassed a huge series of sequels and spin-off games. Seeing as Squeenix is completely incompetent nowadays and fucks up everything they touch, I absolutely recommend checking out the original in this long-running series. This is also one of the really big games that regional exclusivity totally screwed us over here in Europe. The first time the first Final Fantasy game was released officially in Europe was the PlayStation version in 2003. Recommended. After the insanely slow Final Fantasy, we then move on to another arcade classic, Galaga. This is an excellent conversion of a pretty simplistic game. To get anywhere in this game needs training. This is hard as hell. Honestly, I don't have much to say about this one. You play as a spaceship trying to shoot space insects. It's pretty fun, but again, not anything to write home to mom about. Recommended. Next up we have Ghosts and Goblins. Another arcade conversion and a really fun one at that. Made by the amazing folks at Capcom, this is a real classic. Touted as one of the hardest games to beat for the NES. It's one of those games that everyone brags about beating. However, I don't think it's so bad. All you need is some patience and remembering where the enemies show up. Since you restart at checkpoints every time you die, even if you use continues, you can basically brute force it with a healthy amount of persistence and patience. Recommended. Now we move on to Gradius, the first game to include the Konami code. This is one of my favorite NES games of all time. Simply amazing. It features great gameplay, great music and great visuals. Even though you are constantly swarmed by enemies, it never feels unfair. This is an absolute must-play for shoot 'em up fanatics. Fun fact, the idle demo of the game also uses the Konami code to play because you don't naturally start with all the power-ups. Recommended. Next up we have Ice Climber. A really fun little game and maybe my favorite of the Black series for the NES. The controls take some getting used to, but once you get the hang of the weird jumping controls, it's really fun. You play as a guy with a huge mallet trying to get to the top while evading enemies like birds and polar bears. This is an absolute classic and is recommended. Now we move on to Kid Icarus. Now this is some hard piece of shit game. It's another vertically scrolling game and absolutely infuriating. The controls are good, but it feels like it's something missing. Yes, it's a fall down and you're dead kind of game, and when you die, you restart at the beginning of the level. It does look pretty good for an early NES game though. I absolutely hate this game. It is, however, a piece of Nintendo history, I guess, so play it if you want. I will, however, not. Not recommended. Next we have Kirby's Adventure, made by HAL Laboratory, makers of the Mother series and the first two Super Smash games. This is a charming platformer about a puffy creature called Kirby. The unique thing is of course that he can eat enemies and steal their abilities. This might be the easiest game on the Mini, but it might also be the most charming. Just because a game is easy doesn't mean it lacks any challenge either, because there are some areas that can be a bit challenging. But the main thing is experimenting with the different abilities Kirby can get, and that's really fun. Totally recommended. Now we move on to Mario Brothers. This is the arcade classic and not to be confused with the Super Mario games. You basically play as Mario and Luigi trying to tip over turtles in a sewer. That's not very nice of them. Is this the second time Mario is evil? Anyway, the controls are not as refined as in the later Super Mario games and can take some getting used to. It's an old arcade game, so it can get a bit tedious at times. But if you're into this kind of games, it's not awful. Recommended if you've never played it, otherwise play the version hidden in Super Mario 3. Next up we have one of the most celebrated games on the NES, Mega Man 2. Everything is great with this game, and if you've never played it, you should. And if you've played it before, you'll love this version too. The music is amazing, the bosses are fun and imaginative, the play in any order that the series is known for is here, and the stages are challenging but fair. Everything is as it should. And the boss weapons are really fun to use, so go out and play a Mega Man game now. Recommended. Now we move on to Metroid, maybe the most atmospheric game on the NES. It has a lot of things going for it, the immense size, the morph ball and the other fun power-ups. But there's one major flaw in the first Metroid game. No map. You'll get lost a lot in this game unless you draw your own map or look one up on the internet. Otherwise, it's an absolute classic and still plays well today. If you don't fancy drawing, you can however check out the amazing remake on the Game Boy Advance. But if you can't do that, this game is strongly recommended. So you've just beaten Ghosts and Goblins. Ready for a new challenge? The next one is probably my bet on the hardest NES game. Not necessarily because of hard enemies and bosses, but because of enemies respawning all over the place. The first level is fine, but then you get to a spot where you're supposed to jump over a gap and an enemy stands at the edge throwing projectiles at you. This game is like Castlevania on speed. You get knocked back on every hit just like there, and everything moves so fast. Anyway, this is a good game even though it feels almost impossible at times. Recommended. Pac-Man! What am I supposed to say about this hungry little pizza face that everyone hasn't heard of 1,000 times already? It plays nice on the NES Mini and the mazes are just like they've always been. It's one of the best pick up and play games ever made and is an absolute classic. This is one of those games you should play at least one time before you die. Recommended. Now for some Punch-Out! This game is basically just a long boss rush. Memorize your attack patterns, find the weakness, and beat them up. This is one of my favorite series of all time. I've played this game so much through the years, it's crazy, and the NES game is just as good as both the Super Nintendo and the Wii versions. Don't forget to hold the select button during the round pass to let the coach jerk off your shoulder and somehow giving you some health back. Recommended. Star Tropics is basically Zelda if Link had a yo-yo to attack enemies with. This is a really good game and you should absolutely try it out. The only problem I have with the game is that your character is a bit slow to turn around, but you'll get the hang of it after a little while. The game is also pretty cryptic with what you're supposed to do and where to go. The original had a piece of paper with it that you were supposed to dip in water to show you a 3-digit code to be able to go on. This is in the electronic manual on the Nintendo website. Recommended. Super C or Super Contra. Now this is a little weird edition, seeing that no one in Europe has seen a Contra game unless you're a total nerd like me. Why not include the European version called Probotector 2? Why not include the original Contra or Probotector? Anyway, this is not as good as the first game. The difficulty is there though. This is hard as hell. The first level looks pretty boring with its ruined cityscape, as opposed to the jungle from the first game. And of course, I am missing the robots from Probotector. It is still a Contra game though, so recommended. The next one up is the Super Mario series. Yeah, I will do all three in one because everyone knows these games and this is already dragging on more than I expected. So, all these games are good, but why is Peach's hair brown in Super Mario 2? Has that always been like that? Anyway, great games, play them all. Next one up is Tecmo Bowl. I just have one thing to say. What the fuck is this shit? Yeah, this crap shouldn't be on the European version. It's an American football game. I know absolutely nothing about this or this so-called sport. It might be good if you're an American. I'm not. Fuck this game. Second to last, we have the original Zelda. I played this a shit ton as a kid, as did pretty much everyone. First game I played to have a save feature, nice. Music is awesome, don't have much more to say about it. Everyone knows about it, amazing game, play it. Zelda 2: The Adventures of Link. This game is totally different from the original Zelda. It's more of an RPG game with leveling and exploration than the first game. It's also cryptic as fuck. Like in the first town where they tell you to go west but you're supposed to go east. That's Zelda 2 for you. The change to a platformer could have worked if they hadn't made the game so damn hard. To have a chance at the palaces, you'll have to grind like crazy to get your attack and health up to a level where you can take some punishment before you die. Recommended if you're a masochist. So that was all the games for the NES Classic Mini. Is it worth picking up in 2021? If you can get one from eBay at a decent price, absolutely! There's some killer games on there, and even though there's some flaws, I haven't noticed a single glitch in the emulation or anything like that. There's some games that we could have survived without ever playing, like Tecmo Bowl. But otherwise, the selection of games is great. So, that's my views on the NES Classic Mini. What do you think? Is Tecmo Bowl the best game ever made? Have you beaten both Ghosts and Goblins and Ninja Gaiden? Tell me in the comments. You are of course also welcome to like the video and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you around.